Hey Douchebags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and welcome to my review of the debut EP from Daydreamer. This one is called Senses. Now I think I heard Daydreamer's remix of Innocence by Maddie quite a while ago, which I'm pretty sure was reposted by a few different people that I follow on SoundCloud. Overall, I thought it was a very, very unique remix, although I didn't get extremely into it or necessarily support it or anything like that. And recently, Daydreamer came back on the scene since I've been kind of associating myself a little bit more with Seeking Blue, which is Mr. Suicide Sheep's label. I was approached too about covering the track Swoon, which I wasn't really too enthusiastic about covering just because it was kind of a bit of a dreamy progressive house song and I didn't really see the full uniqueness right there. Going directly into this EP, I don't think this track necessarily is the worst appearance on it, just because it sounds fairly good in the context of this, but by itself it doesn't really make a good standalone song. A couple of these songs really do, such as Drift and Traveling Light, which I think work a lot better as individual tracks than this one does. Daydreamer appears to be one of those artists which kind of evolved from the Porter Robinson World's Age, which was only 2 years ago, but a bunch of artists kind of erupted from that album and kind of created this really, let's make this really dream pop EDM sound, and a lot of artists have really followed in that direction since Porter Robinson went that way, really kind of being inspired by Japanese culture and anime, which obviously this artist very much is at the same time, because in tracks like Skyscrapers, we start off on the same foot that one Sad Machine by Porter Robinson goes, using a same or very similar Vocaloid to that song. It's funny because it reminds me of this bootleg version of Sad Machine that I heard where the vocals were taken out and replaced with Rockstar by Smash Mouth, except with the same Vocaloid, and that is what this track reminds me of, which is a bit silly. I'm not necessarily saying it was a bad track, it's just kind of taking a bit too much influence. It doesn't know really where to draw the line with the Porter Robinson sounds. This EP gets on a very bad footing for me because it starts off with two fairly standard generic progressive house tracks. Of course, I did like Swoon a little bit more myself, but in my opinion when this EP starts to get really good is when the track Drift comes in, which the intro actually reminds me quite a bit of Zuckerberg's Deconstructing Nature album, which I really loved last year. The intro heavily reminds me of that and then gets into this really glitchy and minimal drop. But that only comes following a pretty heavy festival-oriented drop, using a saw synth that has been very popular in the trance scene for a number of years. And of course it's not distracting or anything, I actually really like that appearance there. The track is a tad bit short, I would have liked to see what he could do making this thing a little longer. And the thing that really throws me off about this one is that at the end of this track, the same or very similar vocal sample from Porter Robinson's Flicker is used at the end of this thing, which I was really thrown off by. Traveling Light, in my opinion, is the best track on this EP by far. The progressive plucks at the beginning actually sound the best produced out of the entire EP, including the progressive house tracks on this one. And then it goes into this really glitchy and groovy first drop on this thing, which is just really pumping and exciting to get through and has me wondering why more of the EP couldn't be modeled after this more unique style. In some places this is reminding me a bit more of Fellow Feeling by Porter Robinson, just by the fact that it has a lot of melodic elements in some places and then really distorted elements in others, as well as the vocal sample is kind of in that same range as well. It uses a lot of very emotional piano lines, which I actually really liked in the center of this track. And then the second drop is just mind-numbing. It's awesome. It's just noisy and distorted, although I've loved this style on multiple things, and of course it is getting a bit old. On this EP in particular, this probably makes for one of the better spots on it, especially because after that section it almost completely fades out and there's a minute to 2 minutes of piano, which is a really slow letdown from the, probably I'd say, climax of this EP. From that piano line toward the very end of the track comes New Beginnings, which is of course it's another progressive track, but it doesn't necessarily lead up to a drop, which is nice to kind of just get through something and have some awesome soundscapes coming into your ears. The kind of direction that this track takes reminds me of a lot of Puppet's soft-spoken EP, which had a lot of things very similar to this, where we had a lot of build and then just kind of continued into more builds and more builds, and never really dropped into anything, which I actually liked in some places and didn't like in others, but the fact that this is the only track like this on the EP made for one of the better appearances, in my opinion. The closer of this EP, Pages, kind of sounds like a very speedy progressive house track, which, although I didn't really dig the style of this one, I'm really getting something from the indie vocals on this one, which I don't know for sure were done by Daydreamer himself, but that's really my guess here because there's no technical feature on this and it doesn't seem sampled from anything. Following the very intense traveling light and the very interlude-ish nature of New Beginnings, this does make a really nice closer and something that allowed me to leave the EP feeling very confident in the future of this artist. Wasn't really in love with this thing, I didn't necessarily hate it either. If this would have come out a number of years ago, I probably would have gone nuts over this, but just because so many artists have repeated this style, it gets a little bit redundant. I'm stuck between about a solid 4 and a solid 5, so I'm going to go ahead and give this thing a 4.5 like I did with Temanite's album just a couple days ago. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this EP if you have listened to it. If you haven't, I have this stream linked in the description, so make sure to check it out and then let me know what you think about it. I'm Landon Remixes. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you later. Peace.